Next, we will have our Vice Presidents of Research panel, which is always a favorite at the FNAI conference. The moderator for the panel this year is Keith Holland. Keith is the Associate Vice President for Research and Economic Development at James Madison University. Keith, take it away.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Keith Holland. I serve as the Associate Vice President for Research and Economic Development at James Madison University. I'm delighted to facilitate this panel and have this conversation. Many years ago, as an engineering graduate student, more years ago than I would like to admit, I was exposed to the world of inventorship, and I was encouraged to pursue an entrepreneurial venture. Not a pathway that I had considered a possibility. Upon making my way back to academia, I have remained passionate about fostering entrepreneurial mindsets and supporting faculty researchers, inventors, and innovators. I am grateful to be a part of this panel and to share the stage and learn from some of the approaches and successes that my colleagues up here on the stage have in promoting and fostering a culture of innovation and invention. Before jumping into questions, I would like to ask each panelist to provide a brief self-introduction. Andre, will you start us off?
All right. So I'm Andre Marshall. Before I talk a little bit about what I do, I'd just like to tell you about George Mason University. We are a young R1 university. We are the largest public research university in Virginia with over 40,000 students and just eclipsed $250 million in research expenditures last year. We accept 90% of our applicants, and as Vice President for Research, I support the senior leaders, the President, the Provost, and the Deans with the operations of research as well as research strategy. And in addition, I also work with our university faculty and our senior leaders in supporting a research culture of partnerships, scholarship, and translation. And a large part of what I do, because we're such a young R1 university, is really help our operations catch up with the research growth that we've experienced over the past several years, which includes, building research security program or decentralizing our research administration, and of course, building out our tech transfer framework. Thanks.
Thank you, Andre. David?
My name is Dave Hatchett. I'm from UNLV, and like Andre, we are a recent R1 institution. We are one of the most diverse campuses in the U.S. I think we have 70% underrepresented minorities. As a new R1, we have grown expenditures over time, but it's new to us. So in terms of economic, diversity, it is an important thing in Nevada because mining and gaming are the main industries. So that means the university really has to take the lead in putting out new technologies and generating businesses to really support economic diversity. I've been at UNLV 25 years. And my background is I'm an electrochemist, but I work in strategic material recovery. I have approximately 5 patents. I think 2 are still in play, so this is near and dear to my heart. I believe in taking and applying what we do in terms of science and technology and moving it forward, so this is near and dear to my heart.
Thank you, David. Karen?
Hi, so I'm Karen Burg. I serve as the Vice President for Research at the University of Georgia. I also have the hat of Executive Vice President of the University of Georgia Research Foundation. We are a land-grant university, so similar to North Carolina State in that respect. We were established to serve people and to serve the region, both from an educational standpoint as well as from a technology development standpoint. So we understand very much translation. We pride ourselves on being number 1 or number 2, currently holding number 1 in the autumn ranking of products to market. Personally, I am a fellow of the FNAI, and I have a lot of bias. I'm also on the board of directors of FNAI, so I absolutely love this organization. We all have a very different perspective and a role to play. Moment of personal privilege, I'm a graduate of North Carolina State, so go Pack. It's been really exciting to see the many changes that have occurred over the past decades. My family was also recruited to this country because of the Research Triangle Park. So my father was offered a job in the first building, which looked more like a shack in the middle of countryside, it was the Research Triangle Institute. So it's been fun hearing about, from Elizabeth, the snippets about the evolution of RTP as well. So very excited to be here and to be a part of this panel.
Great. And Kelly?
Thank you. I'm Kelly Lucas. I'm the Vice President for Research at the University of Southern Mississippi, also an R1 institute. I serve as the Executive Director of our Research Foundation. I also currently serve as the Chair of the Mississippi Research Consortium, which is made up of the other research institutions in the state of Mississippi. So handle both research and economic development at the university. A little bit about me that I think kind of helps with my approach. I got a degree in science, and then I decided to get a degree in business shortly thereafter, and I moved off and I worked in business for a while before I returned to science to get my PhD. Shortly after that, I worked on Capitol Hill for a United States Senator, advising on policy and appropriations because he was the chairman of appropriations. And then when I returned back to the state, to a research center, continued my research and continued working as an administrator in a research center for the University of Southern Mississippi. I left shortly thereafter, within 4 years, to serve as the first chief scientist of one of our state agencies' natural resources divisions that handled fisheries and coastal zone management, which for a university in a coastal area, pretty critical. So I like to tell people that I've worked in business, I've worked in research, I've helped create legislation and policy, and I've also helped do the regulations from those. And so I like to approach cutting through the red tape for researchers at my institution. I told everybody backstage, VPR is one of the best jobs you'll have. The opportunities walk through my door, the problems go to the provost. And so everyone who comes in there, they have a great idea, they have a great invention, they have something, and they just need some help. They need you to cut through some red tape. And so I'm really there to serve my institution and to help researchers and to help inventors so that we can help society.
Well, great, thank you. From the introductions, we certainly see that there are a lot of different stages of universities, a lot of different structures within the universities, but in our preparation for this panel, regardless of how the structures and evolutions are developing, we identified some common themes in promoting innovation and research and societal impact. David, will you start us off? What do you believe are some of the universal challenges and why do they persist?
Okay, thank you. Well, I think before I start answering that, I'll put it in the context of maturity, right? And institutional maturity isn't how old your institution is. It's really where are you in the journey of aligning all the things that need to align to get research and technology in a lab, out of the lab, to either a company or a startup or some other enterprise. And I'll use my institution as an example. We've had Office of Tech Transfer and Economic Development for 10 years. But if you were to ask a faculty if we had that office, they wouldn't know it's even there. You know, they call it the black hole. If a disclosure goes in, it may not ever come out, that sort of thing. But I would say, you know, how do you facilitate that process for all the necessary people that are going to engage. And that's faculty, that's students, you know, it's not just faculty. In fact, we have an innovation challenge for our students. And we work on every year having a number of student teams that produce something that possibly could move to, you know, a startup or something else. Those are necessary because what that does is it builds it from the bottom up, but you also have to have the top down. When I say top down, I mean not we're enforcing some regulation from the top down, but you have to have alignment. You have to have alignment of the president, provost, and the VPR. And if you don't have that alignment, then along the way there is a stop. I heard it today called a divot. Divot, barrier, whatever you want to call it, if you don't have the path defined so everybody knows where they're going, there are going to be people who do not engage. So those things are crucial. The other thing is investment, right? The North Carolina state saying the state has invested $500 million in, you know, the process. That doesn't exist everywhere, right? The state of Nevada is a mining, gaming state, and for them to invest $500 million is impossible unless it is relevant to what they think is important. So you have to have that level of investment. I was thinking when the person said that this morning that if I had $500 million, what could I do, right? I don't know what that is. I don't even have $5. So that is necessary. But let me get back to faculty because I come from faculty. I'm a chemistry professor, and largely the patents I have, I did on my own. In fact, I negotiated with the company that is using one of my patents on my own without economic development. That is not the way to do it. I promise you that is not the way to do it. So if you don't have the ability for faculty to get credit, so when I talk about credit, I'm saying, does your provost communicate down to your dean and chair that this is valued? And do you get credit for it as you go up for promotion and tenure? If you don't, then why would faculty do it? Other than they think that maybe someday there's going to be something out of it, but how many people are successful, right? So the reality is it needs to be built into the university fabric. At UNLV, I don't think we've done a very good job of that. I think it's hit or miss. One dean will not, because there's no continuity. So when I talk about maturity, I say, what is the continuity of your structure? You saw the track, right, today. What is the continuity of all the pieces on that track? And do they align, or is one off to the side? If it's not all aligned, it's not going to be successful. And we're working through that as a young institution right now because we don't have the level of maturity that some other institutions have.
Would anyone else like to add to that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I am extremely lucky in that when I took over this role, there was already a person in what was then our technology transfer office. His name is Brian Cuevas, and he also came from industry, and he was looking at tech transfer across the university, and he started doing some benchmarking and getting out in the community, and like so many others, he has talked about changing how tech transfer is viewed on campus. So he did a whole rebranding to the Office of Innovation Management. He benchmarked against others, and he started looking at our translational research and it being very stagnant. And he looked back in time and just could see that we're just kind of inching along, same number over time when it should really be growing. And as luck would have it, NSF had put out through the TIP Directorate the Accelerating Research Translation. And so he took the opportunity to be like, look, this is it, right? This is where you're going to get the resources that you've heard others speak of, because you do need those resources, and this was an opportunity. And so I know Doug's here, so Arizona Tech Launch is our mentor for this. Doug's in the back. So he worked across that, and he worked with others. He worked with, y'all have heard Almisha Campbell earlier. She provided a ton of resources to him and to us to move through this. And so it really took kind of the entire campus presenting before senior leadership and getting them to understand what we were doing and buy-in. And he went a step further with a tool that's out there that the University of Michigan has, which is organizational cultural assessment instrument, okay? In looking at what our culture was on our campus, which is a culture of more kind of control, and how we go about moving the needle and changing to a culture where we are more creative and innovative and competitive. And so changing a culture is difficult, but at least we know where we're starting from, and we can start looking at those things that help us move the needle. And we got the buy-in from across the entire campus, as well as our community, who's enjoyed working with us. Recently, one of our business councils has decided they put on a master's class for all the businesses across the Mississippi Gulf Coast. And they decided they were going to focus on innovation and entrepreneurship so that they could help us be successful. And so I really do think it's a thing that once you kind of get the ball rolling and you can get people excited and inventors like you excited, and y'all come to the table and the community can see that and the campus can see that it's really helpful in moving the needle.
Thank you. Well, we see that there's a lot of different stages and recognize the importance of alignment, but we don't want to dwell on all of the negative all the time. There are some great stories out there, right? So, Karen, will you share some
Great
of
story.
the approaches? Will you share some of the approaches that you've seen work well towards measuring and celebrating these successes around invention and innovation?
Sure, absolutely, and I'm not avoiding the question, but if I could add one more thing to the previous comments. I know you mentioned maturity of organization, and so I wanted to make the point that maturity doesn't automatically mean attention to detail and having one's act in order. So I think the NC State story was a good one where there were a lot of eyes on the innovation pathway at different points. So it's a massive organization, but it also has many eyes on that, and it involves a community as well. So yes, to your question about rewards, that's, you know, when I talk to somebody, the first thing I want to understand is, you know, what are the drivers and what are the rewards in their life, because that usually is a predictor of behavior. It predicts why someone is behaving the way they are because of what are the pressures in their life. And I probably got that. I worked in the provost's office at Clemson University for many years looking at tenure and promotion files and working with people, individuals and faculty, deans, department chairs, and really had to understand the people and what the drivers were. And so one thing, and we've touched on this in many of the different sessions at this meeting, but what's often overlooked is that tenure and promotion is actually in the hands of the faculty. And a lot of faculty don't understand that. I certainly did not until I was launched into the provost's office, and that became my role, was reviewing tenure and promotion files. So what do I mean by that? Those requirements for tenure and promotion are voted upon and are discussed extensively and exhaustively at the department level by the faculty. And so the faculty have the power to be able to make the changes of that. They are not rules that come down from the president of the university, or in the case of a system, from the system office or the governor or anyone else. Those actually start at the faculty level. So there's an enormous amount of power. I get this question all the time, and I had a question from one of our faculty members in the agriculture space, and he was really upset, and he wanted to vent. He made an appointment to talk to me, and it was, you all need to change the rules, you all need to change the rules, and I let him vent because he needed to. But then I explained the same thing, exactly what I said to you. I said, do you know what the bylaws in your department are? And he looked at me with a blank face. Bylaws? And I said, go and look at the governing documents, and you'll find the tenure and promotion documents, and then you'll see, what's been set up there. Maybe you'll find some surprising things that you didn't know existed, but you can start the conversation. So anyway, fast forward to a week later, and I ran into him on campus, and he had a big smile on his face, and he said, I've been at this place for 30 years. I thought there wasn't anything new that would ever be revealed to me. You have opened an entirely new world. And so he had started conversations with his department. Yesterday, the question was, well, what happens when you have an unfriendly department and, you know, anti-innovation? And yes, that can certainly be the case. We know we have innovation in pockets, you know, where people are really excited about it. We have pockets where don't disturb our oxygen, our pure oxygen with that. And that's true. However, I would go back to the comment that I made earlier that we in this room all have different roles in the innovation ecosystem. We are all part of this. So it's not me standing by as the Vice President for Research looking to see how this faculty member does with that conversation. I need to support him from my role and from my perspective. So what can I do? And so we do things at the university like we want to honor the fact that, you know, innovators exist and that they have done amazing things, and we want to honor them as, you know, producers of scholarly work. And when you start putting leadership, attaching leadership to those messages to campus, you have the strong sense that, wow, leadership is supporting this as scholarly work. I'll give an example from my previous institution. I served as Vice President for Research at Kansas State University. We were one of the founding members of FNAI. Our president and provost were just adamant that this was important. So we decided every opportunity to have a celebration, we would celebrate our inventors and our innovators. So the first opportunity was, we're a founding member of FNAI, let's have a party. And so we planned one, and we planned it purposely at the president's home. And so he was excited about that. The provost was on board. She was going to MC it. Everyone expected to see me there as Vice President for Research. What the optics were that we were excited about was the president and the provost and having it at the president's home. So we came to the day of the event. Our president traveled a lot. He had a lot of NCAA obligations. He was off-site. Meetings delayed, everything else. He called back, said, I think I'm going to be late. We said, no problem, we'll change the venue, we can do that. He said, absolutely not. I want it at my home, and I'll just come in, I'll sneak in late. And we laughed and talked about, well, while we're there, we'll rearrange the furniture and see if you see how you get in the door. But that was the type of support, and that's the type of input that we as leaders can give to really show that our inventors are important. So at the University of Georgia, we think of different, we consider this carefully all the time. We have major awards that we give. We have a high-profile awards banquet where we invite legislators, we invite researchers, we invite economic development leaders in the community, and that's where we highlight our award winners, and our innovation awards are very much part of that. The state has also supported that, so the state now has a high-profile award. We have one of those award winners here today, and so again, it's that. I've traveled to chapter events, as a board member of NAI. So when universities are launching chapters, been excited to see some of the things there. The license plate for licensees, making a big deal, not just sending a wire transfer of money to an inventor, but making a big deal that your product has been licensed, there's money, and oh, by the way, here's a license plate with the name of the university on it. So things like that to really showcase. Another piece, the last piece, because I know others have good examples too, is we are working on making the report out. In other words, the number of licenses, the number of patent disclosures, et cetera, part of our normal distribution to campus. So traditionally, we have a quarterly report and it talks about all the wonderful things we've done in grants and contracts. It's been devoid of anything. To find out anything about innovation, you have to call our Office of Research. And that's problematic because that sends a message that, somewhere buried in there, it's not important enough to be high profile. So we're working, it's not a simple thing because there are many systems that have to talk to one another, but it's important to us that become part, not an appendix, but that become one and the same and part of that report to campus. So those are a few examples, and I'm sure my colleagues have many more.
Any other brief examples someone would like to share? All right, great. Well, fantastic. Well, thank you so much for that. Andre, this one's for you. Given the theme of the conference, Unlocking Innovation, Keys to Societal Solutions, how can we start shifting the narrative from viewing intellectual property protection and technology transfer as solely economic ventures and sort of shifting that narrative towards social responsibility of researchers and innovators?
Right. So I'd just like to follow up on some of Karen's comments, and I think a first step to that is just building on the momentum that's already in place to incorporate tech transfer, IP, or I should say tech translation and IP and commercialization activities into the promotion and tenure guidance as well as evaluation. And so just normalizing these activities, I think, is going a long way in really driving this narrative that our societal impact is a part of what we do as academics. And some of that oftentimes is met with resistance, right? And I think to get that buy-in across academic units and perhaps across varying perspectives of the academy, we can actually harmonize this idea or some of these ideas about innovation, tech translation, with the fundamental pillars of the academy, research, teaching, and service. I'm not sure how separate the activities that we are engaged in tech translation are from properly contextualized research, teaching, and service activities. And so I think we can get broader acceptance of these activities from that kind of perspective. I think back at my experiences in my startup journey and how it impacted me as a researcher or impacted my mentorship of graduate students and postdocs, or even how it made my classroom lectures perhaps a little bit more interesting when you think about all the ups and downs that you go through as a founder, a startup founder. And so, you know, just perhaps recontextualizing the way that we tell our story is a good first step at driving a broader appreciation of the impact of these kinds of activities. And of course, the investments that federal agencies are making. We've heard over and over again the TIP Directorate, Technology, Innovation, and Partnerships investments. They certainly, not only in the resources, but actually the creative programming are changing the narrative of innovation as being fundamental and not ancillary. And I think back to, you know, NSF and NIH I-Corps program, for example, and you're hearing now accelerating research translation, a brand new program that will undoubtedly change the landscape. And I was just talking to a colleague, and I'll wrap up, but just talking to Kelly, I learned in the last panel about Bayh-Dole. And you know, I knew about Bayh-Dole, of course, but the origins of Bayh-Dole and about how these tech transfer offices came out of this legislation. And with the new TIP Directorate, I'm just wondering, you know, decades later, how the university landscape and even infrastructure will change in the innovation space.
Fantastic.
Sure, I'll add to that. We at UNLV, we are part of a Type 1 and Type 2 engine, and it's obvious that the paradigm has shifted. It is, you can do basic science and engineering, that's fine, but the reality is the engines basically show you need investment, you need governmental and regulatory people involved, you need universities, you need the students and human capital to support whatever industry you are working within. All of those things have to be aligned and present. And you have to have buy-in from, community college, not just R1s, but all of the colleges, all of the universities that are going to be impacted by that. So the shift has happened. I mean, whether or not universities step forward and engage is up to them, but it's already happened. So it means that there's more emphasis on taking things from a lab level to industry, or developing new technologies that can be handed off. I mean, it is here, whether we like it or not. I personally like it, but I know not everybody does. So it's here to stay.
Well, thank you for that, David. I think that's a nice segue into my question that I would like to direct at Kelly. We've talked about this a number of times throughout the conference, and I think you've already addressed some of it already, but we recognize that research and innovation talent, as well as David pointed out, the networks that support the dissemination of that exist beyond our high intensive research universities and our urban centers. And I'm curious to you and all of the panelists, what advice do you have for these developing universities and these communities that want to more fully engage with the research, innovation, and invention ecosystem?
Thank you, Keith. So I think to get to the story, I have to tell you a little bit about Mississippi, just to begin with. We have a population of about 3 million people in the state. We only have 3 metropolitan statistical areas that are in the entirety of the state that aren't bordering an adjacent state. And so you have Jackson, Mississippi, which is where our capital is in the center of the state, about 580,000 people there. You have Hattiesburg area, which is where the main campus of the University of Southern Mississippi is, 160,000 people there. And then you have our Gulfport, Biloxi region, which is on the coast. We are a dual campus, and so we also have a campus on the Mississippi Gulf Coast, in addition to having research centers across all of our coastal counties, and that's about 480,000 people. When you look at that, and even you couple kind of up in the northern part of the state, which is near Memphis, Tennessee, and those counties that are in that metropolitan statistical area, that is less than 1/4 of the counties in the state of Mississippi. So that's 3/4 of the rest of the state, pretty rural. And how do we get to those people? These people are inventors. They solve problems every day in their work and in what they do. And so we really took an approach of understanding that if we're going to be in the communities, we want to engage with everyone, and we want to see what they have. Because it's not just applying those resources on our campus and with our faculty, it's making sure that we're able to reach out into these communities and help them. It's easy for a large business to understand how to work with a university because they do it fairly often. But how does this inventor or this small business that's in the community, how do they get access to your infrastructure, to your human capital resources, and to other things they need to be successful? And so how do we help them, right? And this helps grow the portfolio for the entire state. And we've really kind of taken it as a state approach. I mentioned earlier we have the Mississippi Research Consortium, which is the 4 research universities in the state. So it's the University of Southern Mississippi and Jackson State in Jackson. So we're actually in metropolitan statistical areas. But Mississippi State University and the University of Mississippi. And so we've looked across how do we innovate in its entirety. Our technology officers also work together in addition to the VPRs. And they share kind of the same principles and the way they go about things so that we can do it across the entire state, and we can reach out to those. And that has really, like I said, propelled other people in the community that want to help us help these other inventors, right? And help look at it from a different perspective. We've looked at it from our state economic development agency. How do they go about incentivizing technology-based companies? Because it's different than some of these large car manufacturers that they're trying to attract to the state. So through that, we've been able to partner on EDAs, tech hubs, they're Build Back Better, partnering with Jackson State on an NSF Type 1 engine. And we're really looking at how do we get out into the communities and do that. So we're partnering with high schools, community colleges, our workforce development agencies, basically anybody who wants to come to the table because they want to help. And so I really think it takes a little bit of everybody to help get these inventions out into the society and have this societal impact.
Great, thank you. And David, did you have, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, we have a very similar situation. You have Reno and Las Vegas as really the urban centers, and everything else is very dispersed. We have to engage with our community colleges. There really isn't a choice. And not just the community colleges, but also the tribal communities, because when you talk about an engine or anything like that, you have to engage all constituents. It can't just be narrowly defined, and you have to get buy-in. So if what you're doing, you don't have buy-in from more rural areas, then it doesn't really impact the state in the same way. So it really comes down to how are you as a university impacting what's happening in your state? And are you engaging with all of the constituents that really need to be engaged with to be impactful? So that's really the key for us, is we want to make sure that we engage everybody that needs to be engaged and bring them to the table and let them, help us, right?
Well, fantastic. Well, thank you to all of the panelists here. I really appreciate this conversation. I know that I could continue asking questions for hours, but I think we stand between lunch. So again, thank you so much for your words of wisdom and for sharing some time with us today.
Thank you.